I'm 86 years old. My name is Marjorie. And lately, when I sit alone in the quiet of my house, I can finally see how much of my life was shaped by pain I never spoke out loud. I don't say this to be dramatic. I say it because there isn't much time left to pretend otherwise. My age mornings come slowly. I wake up before the sun, not because I want to, but because sleep doesn't hold me the way it used to. My body aches in familiar places. My hands take a moment to remember what they're for. And my mind goes back. It goes back whether I invite it or not. There are things I did, and things I didn't do. But more than that, there are things I felt and never said. That silence followed me my entire life. I just didn't know it had weight until I got old enough to feel it pressing down. People assume regret comes from big mistakes, failures, disasters. That wasn't my experience. Mine came from small moments I told myself didn't matter, words I swallowed, needs I delayed, feelings I labeled as inconvenient. I was good at being sensible, responsible. I was praised for it. I built a life that looked fine from the outside, and for a long time I believed that meant I was doing it right. Now at 86 I can tell you this. A life can look full and still feel unfinished. I live alone now. The house is quiet in a way that never feels peaceful. It's the kind of quiet that reminds you of what's missing. My husband has been gone for 11 years. Friends drifted away one by one, mostly through funerals, sometimes through distance, sometimes through nothing at all. Children grow up and build lives that don't leave much room for old stories. I don't blame them. That's how life works. I just didn't expect the quiet to feel so final. When you're young, you think pain announces itself. You think it demands attention. But most of the pain that shaped me was polite. It waited its turn. It let me finish my chores before reminding me it was there. I grew up in a home where feelings were considered indulgent. You worked. You endured. You didn't burden others with your inner life. My mother was tired all the time. My father was distant, not cruel, just unreachable. If I was sad, I learned to keep it neat. If I was angry, I learned to swallow it. No one ever told me to do that. I just understood it was expected. So I became a woman who could handle things. A woman people relied on. A woman who didn't ask for much. I wore that identity proudly. I thought strength meant silence. In my 20s, I married a man who felt familiar. He wasn't unkind. He wasn't particularly curious about me either, but he was steady, and steady felt safe. We built a routine: work, dinner, sleep, repeat. When I felt lonely beside him, I told myself that was normal. Marriage wasn't supposed to be exciting. It was supposed to be reliable. That's what I believed. I didn't think of it as settling. I thought of it as growing up. In my 30s, life got busier. Children, schedules, responsibilities that filled every corner of the day. There wasn't time to think deeply, which felt like a relief. Thinking led to questions. Questions led to discomfort. So I stayed busy, productive, useful. I told myself I'd address certain feelings later, when things slowed down, when the kids were older, when work wasn't so demanding, when there was more time. There was always something that felt more urgent than my own quiet unhappiness. I remember moments that seemed insignificant at the time, sitting at the kitchen table wanting to say something honest, and choosing to comment on the weather instead, lying awake at night, rehearsing conversations I never planned to have, feeling a dull ache I couldn't name and deciding it wasn't worth examining. I wasn't miserable. That's important to say. I laughed. I celebrated holidays. I showed up. I did what was asked of me. But there was a part of me that stayed untouched, unspoken, and over time, it grew distant even to me. Pain doesn't always arrive as suffering. Sometimes it arrives as numbness. By my 40s, I was known as dependable, the one who could be counted on, the one who didn't complain. That reputation followed me everywhere. It shaped how people treated me, and eventually how I treated myself. If I needed something, I dismissed it. If I felt hurt, I minimized it. I told myself others had it worse. That gratitude should cancel discomfort. I didn't realize I was training myself to disappear quietly. Now, when I look back, I don't see a single moment where everything went wrong. I see hundreds of small moments where I chose silence over truth because it felt easier, kinder, less disruptive, and it was easier. For a while, time has a way of collecting those moments and handing them back to you when you're too old to make different choices. I'm telling you this now not because I want sympathy. At 86, sympathy doesn't change much. I'm telling you because there's relief in finally saying it plainly. My life was shaped less by what happened to me and more by what I never allowed myself to feel out loud. And it took nearly 9 decades to understand that. I didn't wake up one day and realize something was wrong. That's the part people misunderstand. There was no dramatic moment, no sharp break. Life just kept moving forward, and I kept moving with it, even when something inside me lagged behind. In my 40s and 50s, I told myself I was lucky, had a home, family, food on the table, stability. Those words mattered a lot in my generation. Stability was something you protected, even if it cost you other things you couldn't quite name. My days were full. Work in the morning, errands in the afternoon, dinner to plan, laundry to fold. There was always something unfinished that made rest feel undeserved. I learned to fall asleep quickly, not because I was at peace, but because exhaustion left me no choice. My husband and I spoke mostly about logistics, who needed to be where, what needed fixing, what bill was due. We were efficient together. That efficiency slowly replaced intimacy, and neither of us seemed brave enough to notice. Sometimes I wanted to ask him if he felt lonely too. The question would rise up, sit right behind my teeth, and then I'd swallow it. What if the answer changed something I didn't know how to handle? What if it revealed something I'd have to act on? So I stayed quiet. Silence felt safer than honesty. My children remember me as present. I was there for school events, meals, scraped knees. I don't regret that, but presence has layers. I was physically there, emotionally steady, but not always fully open. I taught them responsibility before I taught them vulnerability. I thought I was protecting them. I didn't want to burden them with my worries, my doubts, my quiet sadness. I wanted to be strong for them. I didn't realize that strength without softness can feel distant. There were moments when I felt something crack through the routine. A song on the radio that hit too close. A passing comment from a friend who dared to say she was unhappy. A stranger's kindness that lingered longer than it should have. Those moments scared me. They suggested there was more to feel than I had allowed myself. So I brushed them away, told myself not to dwell. Dwelling was indulgent. I became very good at not dwelling. Years passed like that. Not badly, just quietly. The kind of life that doesn't raise alarms but also doesn't leave much behind when it's over. In my 60s, the children left home. The house changed its sound. Less noise, more echo. I thought that would be the moment everything slowed down and I'd finally feel settled. Instead, the quiet got louder. Without the constant busyness, thoughts started showing up uninvited. Questions I'd postponed didn't feel so patient anymore. I noticed how little I shared about myself, even with people who had known me for decades. Friends would ask how I was doing, and I'd say, "I'm fine," before the question fully landed. I didn't even check if it was true. My husband retired. We were suddenly together more, and oddly, further apart. We didn't fight. We didn't argue. We just existed side by side. Two people who had learned how to avoid discomfort very well. I remember one afternoon clearly. We were sitting in the living room, light coming in through the window, dust floating in the air. He was reading the paper. I was knitting something unnecessary, and I felt an overwhelming sadness that startled me with its strength. I wanted to say, "Are we happy?" Not accusingly, genuinely. I wanted to know, but I didn't ask. I told myself it was too late to start asking those kinds of questions. We had a life. We had history. Stirring things up felt selfish. That belief stayed with me longer than I'd like to admit. When my husband got sick, everything narrowed. Doctor visits, medications, waiting rooms, The future shrank to test results and next steps. In a strange way, it gave me purpose again. Caretaking filled the space where reflection might have grown. I was good at it. Attentive. I said all the right things to nurses and family members. I kept my fear tucked away, neat and manageable. What I didn't do was talk to him about us. About what we had been. About what we weren't. About what I wished had been different. I thought there would be time. When he died, it was quiet. No dramatic last words. Just a slow slipping away. I held his hand. I told him I loved him. And I meant it. But there were other things I never said. And once he was gone, those words had nowhere to go. Grief didn't arrive as a storm. It arrived as a dull weight. A heaviness that settled into daily life. I went through the motions of mourning the way I'd gone through everything else. It was only later, much later, that I realized I wasn't just grieving him. I was grieving conversations we never had. Versions of myself I never allowed to exist. That's when I started to understand the cost of unspoken pain. Doesn't scream, wait, accumulates. And one day, it sits across from you in an empty room, and you finally have to look at it. After my husband died, time changed shape. Days stretched and collapsed at the same time. Some passed without leaving a mark. Others felt unbearably long. People checked in at first. Cards arrived. Meals were dropped off. Then, slowly, life moved on for everyone else. I stayed. I don't mean physically. I mean emotionally. I stayed in that moment longer than anyone could see. I didn't fall apart, so people assumed I was coping. I had spent my whole life looking like I was coping. Was a skill by then. I learned how to fill the hours. Morning walks, grocery shopping at off-peak times, television on for noise, not interest. I spoke to the cashier more than I spoke to anyone else some weeks. That kind of loneliness isn't sharp, soft, seeps into you quietly. You don't notice it until it's everywhere. This was when the memories started arriving without permission. Not just the happy ones people expect you to revisit, but the awkward moments, the unfinished sentences, the times I chose silence because it felt easier than truth. I thought about friendships I let fade because I didn't return calls when I should have. Not out of malice, out of fatigue, out of the habit of telling myself I'd respond later. Later came and went. I thought about my children, now grown, with their own worries and obligations. They love me. I know that. But there's a distance that forms when you spend decades being the one who listens and never the one who shares. They ask if I'm okay. Say yes, automatically. It's almost reflexive. What I don't say is that some days I feel like a guest in my own life. That I look back and struggle to describe who I was beyond what I did for others. I don't say that because I taught them not to worry. I taught them that I could handle things. And now, at this age, it feels unfair to undo that lesson. So I sit with it. In my 70s, my health began to change in small ways. Slower walking, more careful movements, appointments added to the calendar. Each one a reminder that time was narrowing. Doctors speak in numbers. Blood pressure, cholesterol, risk. They don't speak about the weight of memory or the ache of things left unresolved. I started noticing how few people really knew me. Not just my routine, but my inner life. My fears, my disappointments, my quiet hopes that never fully formed. That realization hurt more than I expected. I had spent years being agreeable, accommodating, undemanding. I thought that made relationships smoother. What it actually did was keep me partially invisible. People remember me as kind, as reliable, as easy to be around. Very few remember me as complicated. And I was complicated. I just didn't let it show. There were moments when I considered changing that. Even late in life. Joining groups. Speaking more honestly. Letting myself be seen. But habits formed over decades don't loosen easily. It felt unnatural to start talking about myself at this stage. Like learning a new language when most of the conversation is already over. The turning point didn't come with an announcement. Came with a phone call. A friend from my younger years had passed away. Someone I hadn't spoken to in a long time. We'd drifted apart without conflict. without explanation. Just distance and time doing what they do best. After I hung up the phone, I sat at the kitchen table and cried. Not loudly, just quietly into my hands. I realized then how many people had exited my life without any real goodbye. How many endings I didn't mark because acknowledging them would have meant feeling something I'd trained myself to avoid. That night I went through old photographs. Not the posed ones. The casual ones. Blurry, crooked, real. I saw a younger version of myself smiling in ways I barely recognized. I wondered what she needed that I never gave her. I wondered what she would think of me now. Clarity doesn't always come as relief. Sometimes it comes as grief layered on top of grief. Understanding doesn't erase the past, just makes it sharper. I saw then that the pain I never spoke didn't disappear, settled into the spaces between things, shaped how I loved, how I withheld, how I endured instead of engaged. And I understood finally that waiting for the right time to be honest is often just another way of avoiding the truth. There are things I can't fix now, conversations I can't revisit, people I can't sit down with and finally say what I should have said. That knowledge sits heavily with me, not as panic, not as despair, just as fact. Time doesn't circle back. It moves in one direction whether you're ready or not. There are mornings now when I sit at the edge of my bed and feel the weight of what can't be changed. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't knock the breath out of me. It's more like a steady pressure, a knowing that settles in before I even stand up. This is the part of life where pretending no longer serves a purpose. I know what's gone. I know what won't come back. There are people I loved who will never hear my voice again. There are versions of myself that existed only briefly, quietly, before I tucked them away because they didn't seem practical. There are words that stayed in my chest so long they no longer feel like words. Just a dull ache where expression should have been. I don't torment myself over it. That would be pointless. But I don't excuse it either. I see it clearly now. And clarity has its own kind of heaviness. When you're young, you believe life is forgiving, that you can make up for things later. That unspoken feelings don't count as losses. But they do. They shape the tone of your days. They decide how close you allow others to stand. I see now that I lived much of my life bracing myself for what I'm not entirely sure. Disapproval, conflict, discomfort. I thought if I stayed agreeable and quiet, I'd avoid pain. What I didn't understand was that avoidance is its own form of pain, just spreads out over time. I don't hate my life. That's important to say. There was love in it, laughter, moments of real connection. I'm grateful for those. Gratitude and sorrow can exist in the same breath. I've learned that. But I do mourn the intimacy that might have grown if I'd trusted my voice earlier, if I'd believed that my inner life was worth sharing, even when it was messy or inconvenient. Now when I speak to you, I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm too old for that kind of ambition. I'm just telling the truth because I can feel the edges of time more clearly now. If you're listening to this and you're younger, I won't tell you what to do. Life doesn't work that way. But I will tell you what I wish I had known. Silence isn't always strength. Endurance isn't always noble. And being easy to live with can slowly erase you if you're not careful. You don't have to announce every feeling. You don't have to make everything heavy. But don't keep postponing yourself. Don't keep assuming there will be a better moment, to be honest. Moments don't wait as long as you think they will. Speak while your voice still feels natural. Ask questions while the answers can still change something. Let people know you, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Because one day, comfort won't matter as much as truth. I'm nearing the end of my life now. I feel it in my body, in my pace, in the way days slip by faster than they used to. I don't fear what's coming. I just wish I'd arrived here with fewer unfinished sentences. If this meant something to you, if it felt familiar in a way you weren't expecting, you're not alone in that feeling. Sometimes just recognizing it is enough to shift something, even slightly. And if you're willing, you can share your thoughts. Quiet reflections matter more than loud decorations. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, told gently and honestly, you can subscribe to the channel The Gentle Truths. These stories aren't here to rush you. They're here to sit with you. As for me, I'm still here, still waking up, still noticing, still speaking finally while I can. That will have to be enough.